Hello and welcome back. We are jumping right in to our final segment with a force of nature. Our next speaker is Carlos Vasquez, starting off in a situation many would find hopeless, a 20-year prison sentence at the age of 19. Carlos's journey is a compelling example of personal resilience and the determination to change one's path. His time behind bars led to a pivotal moment of self-discovery, thanks in part to a life-changing conversation with a chaplain. His encounter sent him on a course of education and self-improvement, eventually leading to the creation of his book, The Price: 5 Principles to Break the Bonds of Trauma and Achieve Personal Success. After his release in 2021, Carlos didn't just settle into society, he set out to redefine his place within it. By founding How to Battle, Carlos has turned his past struggles into a source of inspiration for others, offering practical advice, coaching, and workshops aimed at overcoming adversity. Now he's here to bring his down-to-earth wisdom to us, sharing insights on how to face challenges head-on and use them as stepping stones to build a better life. Please welcome Carlos Vasquez.
Hello, thank you. First and foremost, thank you for the introduction. That was one of the best introductions I've had, and I've had the privilege to have many since my release. But thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here today. I understand the value of time, so I really appreciate you sharing your time with me here today. Um, I'll start here because this is an important part of the mix, and it'll lead up to who I am today. Um, so I grew up in a really good neighborhood, suburban neighborhood, with both of my parents. My sister, we had a dog. Life was good. I played baseball. My dream was to be a professional baseball player. I went to Catholic school. Never been exposed to any kind of struggle at that point. I never wanted it for anything all the way up until the age of 12. But around 12, 13, everything started to change in my life. And it started with my father coming home less and less throughout the weeks. And I remember one day my mother sat me and my sister down at the kitchen room table, and she told us father would no longer be coming back anymore. And she said that he had decided to go create another family with somebody else. And that was it. That was how it ended. And with all the questions that you can imagine was going on in our young minds, my mother didn't have the answers. You know, my mother was dealing with a lot, and she quickly went into a deep depression. She put up a wall, and that created a barrier between her and I. And my mother was the most important person in my life at the time. My sister quickly got involved in drugs with the wrong crowd, and she got pregnant at 16. So my mother had to take on the responsibility of now preparing to help her and her child that was on the way. And in the process, I just felt more and more disconnected from my mom and my sister and my home. And so, like a scene in the movie, I jumped out of my window and I ran away. I ran away into the streets, and I wound up in a gang-infested neighborhood. And I remember when I went, I was introduced to a guy who ended up becoming my mentor. He was 3 years older than me, and his name was Chris. And he he led me over to a car, which was an abandoned car in the back of an alley in an apartment complex, and he told me to sleep there. And so that's what I did. And I remember um, when his parents would go to work, I would sneak into his house and shower and eat throughout the days. And besides that, I was living in the streets. I was running the streets, and I slept in that car for many years. And but there was a pivotal moment in my life with Chris, and that was when one day we were going to a drug house, and he uh, he picked up a 357 Magnum and he played Russian roulette with another gentleman, and he ended up killing himself no more than a few feet from me. And so at that point in my life, I was 16 years old, and I remember thinking about the two men that meant most to me in my life. My father, who had checked out, my father, who had left, and now Chris, who had left in such a dramatic fashion. And it made me feel like the most important men in my life just were going. And so I quickly got deeper and deeper into crime. I remember I developed PTSD, and I didn't know until I Looked back later on in my life and realized it. It was why I was having nightmares and why I couldn't sleep at night and why I felt feelings of guilt and shame. And that's where the trauma aspect comes in for me. And it's just a young life full of trauma to that point. And so not knowing how to deal with that, because in underserved communities and in the hood, you don't go seek help from mental health specialists, right? You deal with it, you move forward. And so that's what I did. And the only way I knew how to deal with it is to continue to do crime and to get deeper and deeper and into that lifestyle. And so by the time I was 18 years old, I was on the run for armed robbery. I got arrested shortly after I went on the run, and I found myself in court facing life in prison. I was facing life in prison because I was a gang member. I was a documented gang member, and they give gang members life in prison in California when you do a violent crime. And so I remember one day the district attorney, who throughout my whole time was trying to give me life, came to me and he said, I'm going to give you a chance to take a deal. And he slid a paper over to me, and the deal was for 20 years with 2 strikes in California in the early 2000s, which for a young man was like a life sentence. But I had to make the biggest decision in my life right then and there. Um, and I remember sitting there looking at the paper, and then I took a minute to look behind me, and there was nobody there. I was 18 years old. I was in court fighting for my life, and nobody was there. And I realized this is not that hard of a decision to make, right? So I took the deal for 20 years, and I was on my way to prison. I walked into prison. The next influential man in my life came to me and he told me, now that you're in prison, you have to earn your bones. You have to survive in here. So you need to be violent. You need to continue to do that in here to survive. And so I did. And for my first decade, I was in and out of the hole. And a hole is a place where you're locked in a cell for 24 hours a day. And I was in and out for months at a time. And about a decade in, um, I found myself in deeper and deeper trouble. And I remember they came and they took me out of my prison cell, and they took me into an office and they said, like, we're going to put you in solitary confinement for 3 years. And so they took me to solitary confinement and they told me I was going to be in there for 3 years. And when I first entered, I was telling myself, like, okay, I could do this. I'm going to do it. I had no choice. And when I got back there, I remember running into a few gentlemen who had been back there for 20 and 30 years in solitary confinement. And they had initially went in for 1, 2, 3 years. And so for me, I quickly felt like I was going to become that. And that became too much for me to bear. And so I planned my suicide. And I remember writing a letter to my mother and putting it in my property and just apologizing for all the pain that I put her through. And I knew they would get the letter to her because when they found my body, they would deliver my property to her, the little property that I had. But the day before I was going to commit suicide, and it's not easy to commit suicide in solitary because they make it to where it's difficult because so many people attempt it. But the day I was going to be able to actually be able to do it, um, a chaplain came down to the corridor and he was walking through and he was passing out Bibles, and he came to my cell and he called me over and he knew something was going on within me, and he slid me a Bible and he challenged me to just keep going and to figure out what my purpose was. And he said all the things he needed to say to get me to buy into that. And so that night I opened my Bible and I started to read it, and it got me through one more day of those suicidal ideations, and it got me eventually to a point where I stopped thinking about suicide and I started to find the answers to the questions that kept me up at night, and that sparked a change in me. And then for the next 3 years in solitary, I read 150 books and it transformed my life. I worked on myself a little bit every single day and it transformed my life, and it transformed my mindset and the way that I viewed life and the perspectives that I had. And um, I finally figured out how that young boy who went to Catholic school ended up in solitary confinement so deep into that life. And I just wanted to get out there and share that, And so I got out of solitary. I went back to general population and I let everybody know that I was no longer going to be a part of that destructive lifestyle. And I got stabbed 2 times. And as painful as that was, it felt so good to know that that was my way out of that life. So I went back into my cell and I stitched my wounds up. I survived, obviously, and it empowered me. Like that pain and that experience empowered me to go back out there and to go to the chaplain and asked the chaplain if I could run coaching groups on the prison yard and bring in the lifers that I felt that really wanted to change, but just didn't have the courage and the empowerment within themselves to do it. But I knew through me, through this person that they remember as being just like them at one point, was able to transform his life, could do it, so can I. And so I started to formulate these groups. And I remember we started to have breakthroughs, and I started to see the change within them and then the hope within them. And then a lot of them just started to think about what it would be like to be free. And then three of those men are out here today, and they're my good friends, and we hang out all the time. It's just a true blessing. And so 4 years after that, I got out of prison early. They let me out of prison early because I applied myself, I educated myself, I got my degree in psychology, and I started to do a bunch of good things, and they let me out early. And technically, I wasn't even supposed to be out of prison until this year in December. And I got out of prison early, and it just goes to show that when you like do good in this world, good things happen, things that you don't even see happen. So I got out of prison with nothing but $200 in my pocket. That's what they give you when you walk out of prison after doing 17 years. I didn't really know much about technology. I went in, I had a flip phone, and when I got out, there were smartphones. But I knew I had something because I knew that if I was able to transform my life and help others do that, that I can get out and bring that value to the world. And I just needed to figure out how to do it. So I immediately enrolled in a Drucker School of Management, and I educated myself on how to create a business, and that's where I started How to Battle. And How to Battle came to me because when I first got out of prison, I used to how to everything, how to set up an email, how to do a job application. And I wanted to become a company where people can go to when they're dealing with things mentally that they can go get the help for. And so that's how to Battle started. And I started to work in schools, and I started to speak in churches and just tell my story and do so much stuff for free because it was like this fire within me and this passion within me that I wanted to share with the world. And so I just did it. And because of that, I had so many great opportunities and blessings come my way. And today, How to Battle is a successful company, and it's growing. And I authored my book quickly after I got out. And the book that I've shared with all of you today, as far as the name and all that, that book, it has the principles that helped me transform my life. That book is the foundation of everything that I teach to people, whether it's in the corporate setting, whether it's in school, whether it's back in prisons, whether it's around my speaking topics. It's the 5 principles that transform my life. And so I put it in a book, and I talk about how, all the trauma I went through, like all the nightmares, all that stuff that took over my life, I no longer experience that anymore because of these 5 principles that I apply into my life every single day. And so I wanted to share that with the world. And so that's what I do today. And I just want to share with you what the 5 principles are briefly. And It's an acronym. So it's it's the price. And I'm a firm believer that everything in life comes at a price. Success comes at a price. Change comes at a price. It's the shedding of the old and adopting of the new. And no matter anything you want to do in life, something comes at that price. And so the price is the 5 principles that I applied in my life. And the first one is purpose, figuring out what that purpose is and letting that be the driving force that pushes you forward every single day, that why. And for me in solitary, that first started off as my mother, just going home to her, just being there to take care of her when she's old, because I didn't care about myself enough to do it for me. That was how it started. And then that adapted and changed through time. The second thing is the R, which is the routine. Once I knew what I needed to do to change my life, I started to create the routine in order to do that. Figuring out what that routine is for you. The third is inspiration. Always being able to think or tap into those things or those people or those events that inspire you to get through those challenging times. The fourth thing is confidence, consistently stepping out of that box, out of your comfort zone, challenging yourself, like I did when I changed my life and went back to the prison yard and got stabbed twice. As much as I was intimidated by that, that changed my life, that experience, because I stepped out of the box that I had put myself in. And lastly is education, being a lifelong learner and knowing that we always have to continue to grow and learn if we want to be able to be successful, right? Education like leveled the playing field for me. Like it gave me a shot at my dreams and goals and allowed me to get to where I'm at today. Had I not been educated, I wouldn't have had a shot. Everything, my record, everything I ever did, all my tattoos, all my scars and wounds meant nothing to people when I was educated and I was able to articulate my vision and dreams and everything to them. And so I tell people, educate yourself. That's a huge part of the mix. And so those are the 5 principles, and there's so much more I would love to share with you. But with this time limit, I want to respect it. But if you wish to find out more about me, feel free to reach out to me on How to Battle. I'm on social media, my website, everything, and I love to continue to share with you all. And I appreciate every single one of you for your time. So thank you.
Thank you, Carlos.
Yeah,
Wow. What a powerful reminder that it's not about where you start, but where you're willing to go.
yeah. Thank you.